If not friend, why so friendly? Alien scientist learns why you shouldn't leave humans without supervision. Ever wondered what happens when you leave humans unsupervised on an alien planet? In If Not Friend, Why So Friendly? An alien scientist learns just how unpredictable humanity can be. Buckle up for a tale of curiosity gone wild and discover why sometimes the best-laid plans go hilariously awry. Don't miss out. This story is out of this world. The gay biological exploration team had not expected to have humans along for their expedition, but then again, they had hardly expected to have large carnivorous worms that tried to eat their faces to attack them the last time, so they supposed that extra protection was worth it. But the humans were really just there for protection, so the team mostly ignored them, meandering around in a wide circle with their weapons ready. Everyone knew that humans weren't exactly the smartest species in the galaxy, somewhere above Drev and below Tusraki, so they were really only good for protection most of the time, or at least that is how many of the team saw it, none of them having ever really worked with a human closely before. The foliage on this planet happened to be a strange sort of blue-violet color, and the sky above also tended more towards purple than it did towards blue. There were plenty of large and unusual-looking flowers, mostly red in color, though when seen under UV light they glowed in many colors unseen by those who could only view on the visible spectrum. The head scientist was just beginning to sample one of the flowers when he noticed one of the humans out of the corner of his eye crouching next to one of the plants. His hand was completely uncovered. It turned out that humans were perfectly fine in the atmosphere, and it looked like he was preparing to touch the plant. "What do you think you are doing?" he screeched, and the human drew back slightly. The head scientist wasn't used to humans, and so did not really understand the expression on its too mobile face. This particular specimen of a human covered one of its eyes, and looked slightly familiar, though he could not have placed it. All humans looked the same to him. Wheel, nothing. You were going to touch that, weren't you? Well, because you better not try that again. We just landed on this planet, and we have no idea what kind of effects the flora and fauna can cause. He turned away, before quickly spinning back in place, glowering at the human whose hand was already stretching out again. Actually, on second thought, a warning isn't enough for you. You have already proven that you cannot be trusted. He pointed towards a little clearing not far off. Go sit down and keep your hands to yourself until we are done here. The human went to protest, but he did not allow for any of that. He had no time for people who could not follow proper safety protocols. The human looked about ready to argue with him, but one stern look sent the human starching off. He nodded, rather pleased with himself. That is how you dealt with humans properly. A firm hand was what they needed. They were kind of slow, so you had to repeat yourself a few times, but they responded well to a firm no-nonsense hand. Admiral Vir sat in timeout, and he thought he had finally become an adult. His hands were neatly resting in his lap as he sat criss-cross on an alien planet, staring up at the sky. A few times the other Marines would pass by and grin at him, and he would smile sheepishly back. He had been put in timeout for touching the local wildlife. Believe it or not, his mother used to hate taking him shopping as a kid because he just had to touch everything. He was also the reason that his father had forbade them from putting their hands, thumbs, or feet, don't ask, against or out of the window. There had even been a rule in museums that he had to be holding his dad or his mother's hand while they walked around to avoid him embarrassing them by touching something that he wasn't supposed to. He had always loved those interactive museums for kids. Apparently, this habit had not exactly gone away into his adult life. And now here he was, Admiral Adam Vir, Armada Commander of the GAY and UNSC combined forces. And he had been put in timeout so he wouldn't touch anything. He took it with good humor, though. By all rights, he should have learned his lesson by now, considering the incident. That one incident. Which one exactly? There were multiple. Yeah, maybe that was why. He shook himself and leaned back in the alien flora, resting his head back on a big flat mushroom that was pleasantly spongy and acted as a great pillow so that he could stare up at the sky. At some point, he accidentally took a bit of a nap, and when he woke up next, the voices had faded as the scientists wandered off into the forest, and he was left alone with only the shuttle sitting and twinkling with metallic light. He frowned, Someone could have told him they were moving on, but that was Oak. He sat up, legs still crossed, and rested his chin against his hand in boredom. He picked at the dirt below him and then prodded one of the strange mushrooms. Adam was bored, and there was a Rundy cell, now under permanent quarantine, to show that that wasn't a good thing. He stood glancing around and walked to the edge of the clearing, where one of those red flowers was sitting, and, looking over his shoulder again, reached down to touch it, making a face in the direction that the scientists had gone off. It's not like he was hurting anything. The flower petals were soft and felt almost like velvet below his fingertips. He sniffed at it to find that it smelled oddly like bleach, though he could completely have been wrong about that. Walking over to the nearest tree-like structure, which was very tall and thin with an umbrella-like apparatus overhead, he found the bark of the tree to have a bunch of small berry-like structures on it in a light blue color. He reached out and picked one. It came off with a sort of soft popping noise, and he rolled it around between his fingers, leaving behind a purplish residue. He squeezed it, and berry juice came out. It smelled sweet, though even he wasn't stupid enough to taste it. He dropped what remained of the berry to the ground and was just rummaging through the foliage when a sound, the snap of one of those mushrooms, pulled him from his reverie. Like a deer in the headlights, he jerked quickly upright and looked around, his heart already beginning to hammer. He turned his head, looking into the bushes where he had heard the sound, and as he did, he thought he caught a strange flicking sort of movement. It was low to the ground, and as it moved it seemed to slither through the underbrush. Adam lowered himself slowly to the ground, reaching behind him and drawing his handgun. There was a strange noise, like more of those berries popping off the tree, and then the slithering moved on. He couldn't help but be interested and followed the sound to where it had been last, finding that all of the lower berries had been stripped from the trunk of the tree. "Ha, you like berries, do you?" he said to himself, wandering over to the next tree and scraping off a handful into his palm. He could still hear the creature moving ahead of him through the brush, and he followed after it, tracking its movement with his ears more so than his eyes. He would have used his thermal vision, but decided against it. It was much more fun this way. Of course, a part of him knew that this was a horrible idea, but Adam had never really been known to listen to his own common sense, especially when it came to meeting new aliens. A segment of dirt showed below him, and he bent down to examine the track. It wasn't a footprint, but a long drag mark through the soil. How interesting. He heard more of that popping noise up ahead and followed after it. When he got closer, there was a sharp sound as if something was drawing back on itself. The creature had noticed him. He crouched down in the bushes, eyes forward to where he knew the alien was. He dropped some of the berries onto the ground, leaving a trail back to his hand where he waited. Of course, he expected to see some sort of creature. What he did not expect was a massive purple viper with a head as big around as a football, if not bigger, peeping through the bushes. He froze in place, blood running cold. It had one large eye in the middle of its face and weird protrusions along the side of its head, which looked to act like whiskers as they trembled in the breeze. It rose up slowly from the ground, lifting its head into the air and then opening its mouth. Its face was segmented into three, so when its mouth opened, its face became twice as large, opening sort of like the hood of a cobra. It didn't have a tongue, but many small undulating follicles across its mouth stained with purple juice. Its mouth closed and its head lowered as it looked down at the berries he had let out. He stayed stock still as the creature slithered closer, lowering its head and lapping the berries off the ground. Its body was smooth, not completely like that of a snake, but similar, and strange protrusions stuck up from its back, rising and falling as it slithered forward. It followed his little trail of berries until finally it was not inches away from his hand. I lifted his head again, and from where he crouched, he stared the creature right in the face. One eye to one eye. It made a sort of rattling noise and opened its mouth again. He imagined it striking at his face, latching onto him and sucking his life out through his eyes. But instead, the creature closed its mouth again, and the tendrils moved forward at the side of its head, almost like it was sniffing at him. It lowered its head and opened its mouth, and he felt the hot humidity of its breath. The creature sucked the berries from his hand. Each of the little saccules felt like suction cups against his hand. It curled into a large coil against the ground and lifted its head again to look at him almost expectantly. He raised his hand slowly and it shied away. He made no sound as he reached out and pulled some more of the berries from a nearby tree before slowly proffering them to the creature, who sucked them up from his hand. He did that a few more times until, reaching out, he let the creature eat from his hand before gently stroking it along its underbelly. He had a feeling those protrusions on its back were sensory, and he didn't want to overload it. The creature pulled back in surprise at his touch, but not entirely, and as he continued to stroke down its neck, it seemed to enjoy it, pressing into his hand and making that strange noise again. He smiled, giddy and scared at the same time. This was so cool. He coaxed the creature with him as he went around pulling berries from trees and feeding it from his cupped hands. The snake thing slithered at his side, and on one occasion even began to slither up his body. He let it, and it used him as a staging ground to lift its head into the trees and suck the larger berries from higher up in the tree. He rewarded the snake thing with more belly rubs with his hands now stained purple. Eventually voices floated to him through the forest. The snake thing rested its chin on his head, sunning itself on top of him like he was a tree. He walked back towards the shuttle, pleased to show the others his new friend. The head scientist was pleased with the samples he had taken. He had started with the ground plants and was likely to work his way up. He had been careful not to touch anything and hadn't seen any native wildlife so far. It would take some time for them to get to know the planet like they really wanted to, but that's how these things worked. Science was slow, and they had to be careful. They did not want to disturb the local wildlife under any circumstance. What in the fuck is that? The human's cry of alarm jolted him from his thoughts, and he looked up in stunned shock to see the human from earlier walk forward, cradling a large alien creature in his arms. "Shut." The human hissed. "Don't scare Jeffrey." "Who the fuck is Jeffrey?" The alien creature lifted its head and opened its tri-hinged mouth. He rubbed its chin. "It's okay, Jeffrey. Yes, I know. They're being very rude." The alien stood on in shock as the human patted the alien creature like nothing they had ever seen. He was just sitting there, cuddling an unknown alien. "Tell you what did I say about two UC sharing things?" He hissed with a squeak. The human lifted its shoulders. "Well, about that. I sort of got bored, and then I saw Jeffrey, and I thought, why not try to make friends?" "You tried to make friends with a giant alien snake?" "Well, I would rather not have made enemies with him." He rubbed Jeffrey's chin, and the snake thing rattled. The other humans gathered around in shock and awe. "What are you doing?" He hissed. That thing could be dangerous. The humans ignored him. "Yeah, just get some of those berries, and I bet he'd eat right out of your hand, and then maybe you can pet him." The humans wandered off to find berries, coming back with their hands piled and their skin stained purple. "Don't touch it," he squalled, but the humans were hearing none of it. The snake thing leaned down and slurped berries from cupped hands before stretching its neck upwards to enjoy pats from the other humans. The aliens stood there in shock as the humans gathered around. He had ordered the human not to touch anything, but instead he had gone off into the forest and pack bonded with some unknown alien creature. He would have to write to his superiors about this. He would not be working with humans in the future. Annoyingly, humans had to make friends with everyone. What a twist. Who knew a human's boredom could lead to an interspecies friendship? Did the scientists' worst fears come true, or did curiosity pave the way for an unexpected breakthrough? Hit like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts below. Stay tuned for more wild adventures with Sci-Fi Humanity.